Hi, welcome back to the Ed Solly Show. I'm super excited for my next guest, Suzi Voyles, running for the 6th District in Georgia's Congress. Welcome on, Suzi.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So I got to see you speak in the town hall. That was about a week ago, week and a half ago, maybe. You did a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
It's clear education is something very important to you. That Extremely. You've spent a lot of time in. It's not a new issue for you. So tell us about your take on education, from what we're seeing with the critical race theory and the other divisive things that are being done, and what you want to do when you get to the federal offices.
As far as education goes, I think that's one of the major problems we have in this country. And the reason being, if you go back to our founding, the reason Webster and his little cronies started public education in the first place was for a single purpose, and that was so children could learn to read, specifically learn to read the Bible. And they felt that the Bible was foundational to our country, and without that foundation, they thought the nation would crumble. So they set apart to do that. And if you look at where we are today and how we have literally divorced ourselves of those principles, especially when you have something like CRT coming in.
Right.
I think that is so egregious to everyone. And what happened back in the late 19th century was Marxists came into America, but they couldn't separate us by class.
Right.
Because anybody can come here and start out with nothing and wind up, as I put it to my grandchildren, a gazillionaire.
Right.
And that's a number they understand.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so they couldn't separate us that way because there was the promise of the American dream. And so they had to figure out another way. And in comes the Franklin School, where they came up with another way. And unfortunately, that was dividing us by race. Mm-hmm. Every race that has come here has had problems, but we don't understand that critical race theory is such a lie.
Right.
It is from the pit of hell. I'm a Christian, so I believe that we are, as the Bible says, we are uniquely created by our Heavenly Father.
Right.
Which means we're created in His image. If I'm created in His image, our skin tones are going to differ, but that has nothing to do with the essence of who I am. And that's what critical race theory has set to do. It has no place in our military. It has no place in our schools. It has no place in our society, because we are better as a united people.
Right. Well, and what we're learning, specifically here in Forsyth County, is when you find a piece that's clearly critical race theory and it's clearly part of this indoctrination that they're trying to do, it's getting reworded, rescripted as DEI or SEL.
Oh, exactly.
They're changing the acronyms to just make it seem harmless. And hey, focus on test scores. Let's just look at the test scores. Don't look at the other 70% of what we're teaching kids. Let's just look at the last day and how they tested. And we've made testing easier, and we've lowered the requirements for a lot of the testing to keep the test scores up. And it's just the slow dumbing down of America. And the scary part is it's based in that little bit of truth. They take that little bit of truth and they twist it. That makes it such a good lie. All good lies are based in that little bit of truth, and that's what CRT has done. And that's why it's taken such a hold. And I'm with you. I think you can look back since they took Bible out of schools, every negative statistic that there is when it comes to a population has increased drastically from that point on. It's you take Bible out of schools, everything starts going up. Then you take prayer out of schools and it goes up even more. And now we've gotten to this point where it's how do we recover? How do we get it back?
I came from California, and when my husband and I moved here I'm this young teacher, and I was actually a traveling teacher. They had the mistaken thought that because I had a California credential, remember, I was only 23 years old. I did have 2 master's degrees by that time, but they thought, ooh, this is really great.
Yeah.
So they taught me to teach teachers. But the thing that amazed me is when I went into the classroom, they would say prayer before lunch. This was here in Georgia.
Right.
And this was in Fulton County, Georgia. In fact, the first school that happened to me in was College Park, which is kind of down near the airport.
I grew up down that way.
Did you really?
I did.
That's
Yep.
a cute little town.
It is.
I like it.
It
It's
is.
got a real resurgence right now.
It
going
does.
on.
Yes.
Yeah. We've got a lot of my daughter's friends who are moving down there. But I was amazed because that wasn't allowed in a public school in California.
Right. Well, and that's, I grew up down that way. I grew up in Fayetteville, and it was the same. We were allowed to pray in school, in elementary school, and then by the time middle school comes around, it's a little less okay, and the teachers aren't pushing in as much, and and that's not even close to what it is now. This was
Right.
40, 30 years ago. That's not even close to what it is now, and that's why I'm such an advocate for school choice. I think school choice is just at this point denying a parent the right to send their kid wherever they want and forcing a public education on them seems just cruel.
Interestingly, one of the first groups that endorsed me was an educational choice group, and she calls it the backpack plan.
Okay.
Where the money follows the child,
Right.
like a backpack follows the child. And whether you homeschool, and this is getting back to an earlier point that you made, that money is not the government's money that they appropriate for your child. That is taxpayer money. We are the taxpayers. And so that money should go
It should.
to follow the school, the
And
student.
to your point, when public school was founded, the only book they had was the Bible. And now the only book they're not allowed to have is the Bible.
In most schools, but some teachers are very creative and they put it in as world literature. But you shouldn't have to be creative.
Right. You shouldn't. You should just be able to have a Bible class.
That's right.
It doesn't make any sense to me. So let's move on to election integrity. So election integrity shouldn't really be a federal issue, in my opinion, but the left is making it one. So let's talk about H.R. 1, H.R. 4, and what they mean and what people really need to know about them and what your stance is on them.
All right. First of all, you're absolutely right. It is not a federal issue. I went up and I fought H.R. 1. I fought H.R. 4. It had a nice name, the John Lewis.
Sure.
Yes. Right after he died. They tend to paste nice names onto things. S1 was it was the Senate version of H.R. 1.
Right.
This is so egregious. Now, first of all, I want to back up just a tad.
Okay.
Yes, I believe in having a voter ID.
Okay.
And I was a poll manager for years, but we were told to call them government-issued photo ID. We couldn't ask anybody for a driver's license.
Okay.
We have to fight this. I don't care whether they put it under the guise of voting. I don't care where they put it. It doesn't belong there. And if you were watching yesterday in the news, there was breaking news as to the evidence from, and this is just Fulton County. Remember, there's 159 counties in Georgia.
Right.
So just that news about the proof of the ballots, the proof of the tapes in Fulton County, and even in the middle of the newscast as we're watching this, all of a sudden I said, we were talking about the fact these tapes had not been signed as according to law by a manager and two assistant managers. Right. I looked at the tapes more carefully that we had up there, and sometimes you look at something and look at something and look at something, and I said, those tapes have to be a forgery. And Garland Favorito looked at me and he said, why is that? And I said, they're 2019. We didn't even have those machines in 2019. These were certified tapes in Fulton County, Georgia. Now, this is why it needs to be at a state or a local level.
Right.
Now, our problem, at least in Fulton County, and I can name a few other counties, is the fact that it is the county that is so corrupt.
Right.
And we all remember Stalin's quote, it doesn't matter who we allow to vote, it
Just
matters who
counts them.
counts the votes.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happening. The evidence is so enormous with what's going on and what has gone on. It cannot be ignored any longer.
Right.
Unfortunately, 1st of May, we start early voting.
Right.
And places like Fulton County have non-citizens dealing with our registration.
Right.
That's kind of scary
That's
to
kind of
me.
scary. Yeah. What's their motivation?
That's very, very scary to me. And they have not done 1 ounce of prosecution for things that we know are wrong. And I'm talking about people who flew in from California, voted in Gilmer County, husband and wife, to property that they no longer owned. These were the ballots that were sent out by our Secretary of State,
Right.
saying, here, have one of these. So no, this is not a federal issue. If we can't even take care of it on a county issue, how in the world do we expect this to be done?
Right. Well, and
on
that's
a federal?
this SB 202 here in Georgia that dealt with our election
I
law.
worked on that.
Did you work on? Okay, so I like it. I think it does a lot of good things, but we have to I think we need to be even more bold, specifically around drop boxes. I like that drop boxes are inside now. I do like that. I like that they close when the polls close. I like all of those things. What makes me nervous is when a small amount of corruption can open you to a large amount of fraud, is it just takes one polling place that allows people to drop in as many many ballots as they want, and we've defeated the purpose.
This is not a new thing. I've been studying this since before 2000. We all remember the hanging chads then.
Mm-hmm.
2004, was an issue with pre-printed machine ballots.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, that's what I
Right.
found. I watched the harvesting that went on in California. I watched the harvesting that happened in Florida, South Florida. And I'm against the drop boxes, period.
Yeah.
I don't care whether they're inside. I don't
just
care
need to
whether
go
they
away.
are. They were not legal in the first place. And, that's kind of like,
We compromised too much on it. We compromised too much, and I think it gave too much of an opportunity for. Now, whether the votes were legitimate votes or not is a different discussion, but they came in the wrong way. There's a process in which they have to come in, and Georgia has to enforce the law. We need a stronger enforcement mechanism when it comes to our elections. To your point, nobody's been prosecuted, and people should have been prosecuted.
well, and not only that, why did we enter into a consent decree in the first place? I am the most frugal taxpayer we have. But if we're afraid that somebody's going to sue us, as far as I'm concerned, don't buckle at the knee.
Right.
Let them sue us.
Right. Lawyers
it's-
exist for a reason.
If it's legal, it's legal. If it's not legal, it's not legal.
I-
And don't penny patter around and say that's your excuse for getting something done.
And
As
Brad
far
will have to answer for that. He's got people coming to the polls to answer for that for him.
That's right. And 202 there were some good things, but I looked at both the Alabama law and the Florida law. Florida's in our same circuit. That's why I looked at their laws. They've done a lot in the last 20 years to really improve theirs. We could have done a lot. And one of the things that theirs has penalties.
Right.
Our law does not have penalties for anything you do wrong.
Right.
Alabama's
enforcement.
law, this is where we started to let things, took the finger out of the dike, so to speak.
Right.
Alabama's law was very interesting to me. They did a couple of things that I think really helped to secure the vote. One of them is they have no early voting.
Right.
Our next door neighbor has no early voting. The second thing they do is they tie students' absentee ballots to the address, their home address, not their school
Not their
address,
school.
where they obtain their financial aid.
Right.
And if they vote anywhere else, they lose their financial aid.
Right. Less college influence.
That's where we see most of the problems.
Right.
And when our daughters were in college, and we learned this because, interestingly, in Alabama, our middle daughter went to Sanford University, and she was,
I love Sanford.
we did too, but disenfranchised.
Mm-hmm.
Fulton County laughed because over 200 Fulton County students at Sanford did not receive their ballots.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was pretty important to us. And students were not allowed to leave the campus
Right.
during the week. But I called the president of the college and I said, sir, our daughter did not receive her ballot. She will be driving home
To vote.
Monday night to vote. She will be voting in line at 7:00, and then she will return to school without any delay. He said, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, he's not going to say no to that.
And I said, and without penalty. So that awakened me to how many students really have a problem with this. So when our last daughter went to Hillsdale, what we did is we obtained the ballot at home, put it in a FedEx envelope. So it was in a totally different envelope, sent it up to her, and she had our account to FedEx it back.
Yeah, it's important to protect it. And Suzi, it sounds like you've got a wealth of knowledge on a wealth of subjects. You've been involved for so long. Tell everyone where they can find you and how they can support your campaign.
You can find me at SuziVoyles.com, and that's just my name, SUZI, V like in victory, OYLE, S as in Sam.com.
All right. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.